So apparently Naughty Dog believes that crunch is necessary for games at its level. Originally I was working on another Crimson Desert video when I read this headline from Kotaku and I was like, okay, hold up, what the hell's going on here? What is this level we're actually talking about, and more importantly, is achieving it even worth the cost? Now, crunch isn't just a gaming industry problem, and it's not only tied to Naughty Dog. It's an unfortunate reality in many industries, and a lot of projects sometimes do require overtime for completion. Even on an individual level, I sometimes end up working more than 12 hours a day just writing a script for a single video. So I won't get into whether it's a good thing or a bad thing because that's an entirely different can of worms. What I do want to talk about is the fatal flaw in Naughty Dog's approach to game development from a customer's perspective, and how all their effort is directed in the wrong direction on all the wrong things. In an interview with Kiwi Talks, the former senior game designer at Naughty Dog, Benson Russell, talked about how crunch was ingrained into Naughty Dog's workflow.
I think after The Last of Us 1, when we had the meeting, because every meeting after that was always like, hey, what are we going to do to try and mitigate crunch? How are we going to make this better? And eventually it was just an admission in the meeting. It was like, well, we just come to realize this is what it takes to make games at our level. And we understand if you don't want to do that, that's fine. We understand. We'll write you a great letter of recommendation. That was the answer.
Now, love them or hate them, we can all agree that Naughty Dog does deliver very good looking and well polished games. I remember being blown away how the Uncharted games looked, especially Uncharted 4 back in 2016. It felt like a true next-gen game at the time. The visuals were crazy, the gameplay was solid, and pretty much no other game looked like it at that time. But let's talk about The Last of Us 2 for a second. Because even though the game is solid from a technical standpoint, the question is, given the amount of controversy surrounding that game regarding extreme and toxic crunch culture, was it really that impressive? Can The Last of Us 2 be called a revolutionary game? I don't think so. The thing is that Red Dead Redemption 2 came out 2 years before The Last of Us 2, and despite being a massive, sprawling open-world game with NPCs having their own routines, dynamic weather systems, entire ecosystems being simulated in real time, and horseballs reacting to temperature, despite all that, it stood toe-to-toe against The Last of Us Part 2 when it came to visual fidelity and physics. Now, RDR2 also had a lot of reports on crunch, but the important thing is, it probably paid off, because it's a universally beloved game and just recently it became the 4th best-selling game of all time. Now, you might not like Red Dead 2, but that game can be considered revolutionary when it comes to open-world design, visual fidelity, and in-game physics. There's a reason why, even 8 years after release, people still compare to other huge games like Crimson Desert and it still holds up. The thing is, the devs at Rockstar simply said that we want to create the best open world game ever, we want to create something that people will fall in love with. Even story-wise, they wanted to tell the best story out there. On the Lex Friedman podcast, Dan Houser, the former lead writer at Rockstar Games, talked about how he wanted the characters in Red Dead games to feel compelling and believable, how he wanted to write dialogue that wouldn't feel cringy, dialogue that people would actually want to listen to. I mean, by the end of the game, you probably knew that Dutch was full of shit, but you still wanted to hear what he had to say, even though you knew that he'll just tell you that he has a plan. And I'm sure that there is no character in gaming more universally hated than Micah, but even then, when he was on screen, you wanted to hear what he had to say simply because he was a compelling character. Can the same be said for Jesse, or Dina, or Abby and her entire crew? I don't even remember most of them. The reason I bring this up is because Naughty Dog excels at making story-driven cinematic experiences, but if you strip away the top-tier motion capture and the stunning lighting, what are you actually playing? The Last of Us Part 2 is pretty much the same thing as Part 1, with the addition of a few open-ended areas, tall grass for stealth, the ability to go prone, and a golf club in Joel's head. All you're doing is sitting through a cutscene, sneaking around, killing everything that moves, and occasionally upgrading your weapons. So then, why is The Last of Us Part 1 still loved by a vast majority of gamers while half the fanbase, the same people who loved the first one, absolutely hated the second? That's where the fatal flaw in Naughty Dog's approach to game development comes in. Reese kicked off the interview with Benson Russell with this question: what do you think is the most important aspect of game design? To which Benson replied, player fantasy. And it's kind of funny coming from an ex-senior developer at Naughty Dog, because the current leadership at the studio completely misses the point as they focus more on Druckmann's fantasy instead of the player fantasy, which, let's be real, are mostly men. I mean, I mostly talk about these games and I only have like 2 females in my audience, and I'm sure even they tapped the video by accident. But yeah, if you're enjoying the content, drop a like on the video. We're just 98,200 subs away from hitting 100,000 subscribers, so hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate the support. Thank you. The Last of Us Part 2 sold around 14 million copies, which is not surprising given the first one sold over 37 million, but what's fascinating is that Ghost of Tsushima, a brand new IP made on a fraction of a budget, also sold around 14 million copies in around the same time frame. It didn't have 4K reflections in every puddle, you couldn't see every pore on a character's skin. I mean, it's safe to say that Ghost of Tsushima was not on the level of a Naughty Dog game. Then why is it that, unlike The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima is still a universally beloved game? Why did it resonate with a vast majority of players? The reason is quite simple. Sucker Punch focused on what mattered to the player. They knew that you, the player, wanted to play as a badass samurai fighting to save his home and his people. They understood that you wanted to be a hero, and they gave you exactly that. And now the recent success for Crimson Desert only further proves the point. At the time of me making this video, it has sold over 5 million copies in 27 days. The story is pretty much non-existent, it is not a cinematic experience, it is not polished to perfection, but it nails the player fantasy, the feeling of being an overpowered, magic-wielding, sword-swinging, dragon-riding badass trying to save the world. The sales numbers and player counts have spoken. This is what works, and this is what actually matters more to the gamer. A good story, compelling characters, cinematic quality, and visual fidelity are like icing on the cake once the game gets the basics right. And that's something that Naughty Dog's new game, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, is missing again. There's no doubt that it'll be a visually and technically impressive game, but really, who wants to play it? I certainly don't, and I'm sure many other people feel the same way. But of course, that's not gonna stop IGN from shamelessly shilling for it. I mean, just look at this. Naughty Dog has made headlines multiple times in the last few months as players eagerly await its highly anticipated big-budget sci-fi adventure, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. The excitement surrounding the project is something Sony is all too aware of. Oh, come on, just look at the like to dislike ratio on the trailer, just look at the comments. I mean, even a dumbass like me knows that this cannot be labeled as a highly anticipated game. But anyhow, the point is, Naughty Dog can polish a hallway to perfection and make sure that every pore on a character's skin is rendered with surgical precision, but at the end of the day, it's a static, linear experience that relies heavily on a compelling narrative. Meanwhile, other studios like Rockstar or Pearl Abyss are crunching to push boundaries of player freedom and expression. I mean, let's be real for a second. Intergalactic most probably doesn't have a dynamic weather system, NPC routines, or the complexity of a sprawling ecosystem like Crimson Desert or RDR2. And I could be wrong, but I can very confidently say the story is gonna suck ass too. Yet still, it has been in development for years with pretty much nothing to show for it. So what exactly is this so-called level that Naughty Dog believes justifies mandatory crunch? In my opinion, it's nothing more than the hubris and the arrogance of Neil Druckmann, that's it. And all it's doing is running the studio into the ground. As Benson noted, it's either crunch or it's a recommendation letter. He himself left the studio back in 2015 before Uncharted 4 even shipped. At the time of The Last of Us Part 2, things were allegedly so bad that many employees actively wanted the game to fail, and once the game was shipped, it was reportedly followed by a mass exodus. So Naughty Dog has lost a lot of talent that made them great in the first place. The veterans who worked on the older Uncharted games and the original Last of Us, well, they're probably gone. Now, they tried to improve things by hiring people specifically to mitigate crunch, but even those people have reportedly left the company as well, and the studio is once again falling back into their old habits. Just last year, there were reports of devs working overtime on an internal demo for Intergalactic. Not an external demo for the public, mind you, an internal demo for Sony executives. That's how bad things are. I mean, just imagine sacrificing your family time working on an internal demo of a game that's getting ripped to shreds by players just after the first trailer. Of course, the devs would want to leave the company. And to be honest, I think many of these new hires are just using Naughty Dog to pad their resume so they can land a better job elsewhere anyway. The moment they get the chance to jump ship, they're definitely gonna take it. And when talent keeps leaving like this, the company has to train new developers from the ground up over and over and over again. And this is what keeps on wasting more time and resources. But I'll leave you at that. Do share your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think the level of Naughty Dog games justifies the intense crunch, or is it just Neil's hubris and arrogance dressed up as prestige? Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you found the video valuable. Also use the hype feature so my video gets more exposure and my small channel blows up. I would really appreciate the support. Thanks for watching, and now I'ma go play some Crimson Desert.